Welcome to Get Sleepy, the podcast where we listen, we relax, and we get sleepy. My name is Thomas and I'm your host. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight we'll enjoy a tranquil tour of a Japanese Zen garden with the guidance of a monk. We'll relax among flowering plants and trickling fountains, peacefully observing the serene settings. Most of us have heard of Zen. It's a school of Buddhism that originated in India, developed in China, and then spread throughout Asia. But regardless of our beliefs or backgrounds, it's the elegant simplicity of a Zen garden that we will focus on tonight, and the relaxation that it induces. I appreciate that you're here to relax and fall asleep. So let's unwind and do just that. Take a deep breath in, holding for a moment, and then release. As the breath flows out, so too can any lasting energy that has carried over from the day. It's time to put things down and switch off. Breathe in deeply, hold, and release. However you feel at this moment, just know that you are in the right place to get a well-deserved rest. It can be easy to feel a sense of anxiety or frustration if it takes a little while for us to switch off the mind and to make our way towards sleep. But just remember that you are able to rest your body and calm your thinking even before you've nodded off to dreamland. So, without any pressure, continue with some slow, soothing breaths, and you can simply follow the sound of my voice as you gradually make your way to sleep. Allow your mind to drift to a quiet, peaceful place nestled somewhere in the forests of Japan. This is where our story begins. The roof of the temple curves upwards like a smile. The walls are white, while the columns and roof are a rich, glossy brown. It's a sunny spring morning, and the leaves of the trees flutter in the slight breeze. With no one else around, it's the perfect picture of serenity. You are the only visitor. To set foot inside the gardens of this historic temple, you first need a special letter of permission. There are no crowds and no tourists, only you, waiting to be met by your guide. The young man who comes to greet you is a monk. His head is shaved, and he wears a long black robe. He introduces himself as Yuto and says that he is one of the many Zen Buddhist monks who live at the nearby monastery. The temple's restricted access and remote location mean that they don't get many visitors. Today, he will show you around the famous Zen garden and share a little about his life. First, you walk together around the temple walls. His pace is slow, but deliberate, and he seems to be paying careful attention to every moment. Normally, you would walk more quickly, but Yuto's relaxed pace encourages you to slow down too. There's no reason to hurry here. There's no plan or timetable. It's refreshing to be able to forget about time for a while and to simply enjoy the experience, living in the moment. You stroll down a tree-lined path, side by side, and Yuto begins to tell you about his life as a monk. His words are as slow and measured as his steps, and he has a low, calming voice. Life in the monastery follows a strict routine. The monks wake up early, before dawn, and gather in the temple to meditate. Then they eat breakfast together in silence, mindful of each other's company, but focused on the act of eating. The rest of the day is spent meditating, studying, or carrying out various duties in the monastery and temple, such as cooking and cleaning. For example, Yuto spent this morning sweeping and mopping the floors, a job he finds relaxing and satisfying. Yuto explains that when you are in the right state of mind, you can find pleasure in everything. A life of early mornings, long meditation sittings, and hours of domestic work may not seem enjoyable at first, but a mindful attitude makes all the difference. No matter who you are or what you believe, Yuto says, you can benefit from the Zen mindset. Appreciate the simple things in life and devote your full attention to whatever you are doing in that moment. As one proverb says, when walking, walk. When eating, eat. You stand together in silence and look at the landscape. Taking a deep breath, you focus your attention on the small pond in front of you, noticing how the surface ripples slightly in the breeze. You can see the reflection of the trees mirrored in the water. Looking up, you notice the elegant curves of the branches and the vibrant green of the leaves. It's as if you had never truly taken the time to really look until this moment. You continue to admire the scene, your gaze drifting down to the pond, then back up to the branches. The longer you look, the more relaxed you feel. You can feel your breaths becoming slower, and with each breath, a deepening sense of peace and well-being. Eventually, you turn to look at Yuto, who is still standing beside you. His gaze remains fixed on the trees in front of him. He must have walked past these same trees hundreds or even thousands of times. They must be so familiar, so unremarkable. And yet, he's still happy to stand here, looking, enjoying the peace of the moment. At last, Yuto turns away and begins to walk on. You follow him through the temple gardens, past trees of every kind, pines, magnolias, and even a few cherry blossom trees. You're impressed by the beauty of the cherry blossoms and the delicate pink petals that drift to the ground in a slow shower. But Yuto's lesson in mindfulness has helped you to appreciate the more ordinary trees too, noticing the patterns on the trunks or the shapes of certain branches. Before, you might have only looked at the cherry blossoms, but now you can see the beauty in everything. The gardens around the temple are clearly well looked after. The flower beds are neat and tidy, and all the plants and trees seem to be thriving. But this groomed, cultivated landscape seems wild when compared to the Zen garden. It is this special garden that you've come here to see. You've heard of these remarkable, ordered gardens at Zen Buddhist temples. They are not ordinary green spaces, but rather carefully arranged rectangles of sand or gravel, decorated with rocks and small plants. The first Zen gardens were built in the temples of Kyoto in the 14th century. They were designed to create a space for meditation, representing the essence of nature. An area of raked sand might represent the sea, with a rock as an island and a hill as a temple. Or the sand might be swirling clouds, with the rocks as mountain tops rising into the clear air. Each garden is unique, and you're curious to see this particular design and to learn more of its symbolism. Yuto is guiding you there now, around the back of the temple and along a narrow gravel path that slopes down the hill. Yuto takes you to a stone bench halfway down the slope and gestures for you to sit down. He explains that it's not necessary to enter the Zen garden to appreciate it. In fact, gardens like this were designed to be viewed from a single position. It's a little like gazing at a painting or a sculpture in a gallery. The viewpoint from this bench will allow you to appreciate the garden to the fullest, experiencing it as its creators intended. The garden is a large rectangular space surrounded by a low wall. It mostly consists of gravel and sand, some grey, some white. But there are also various small plants, rocks, and even a miniature waterfall. A monk is slowly raking the gravel in a curved pattern. Yuto explains that raking a Zen garden is a meticulous, mindful task. It's an art that requires special attention. The gardener must choose the right kind of rake and the appropriate movements to create the shape he desires. The pattern of a wave, a ripple, a stream, or a drop of water. While they may sound similar, each one is a distinct design. These gravel patterns are particularly striking late in the afternoon, when the long shadows highlight every edge and ripple. This effect is also an important reminder of change. While the garden may seem static, it's never exactly the same. The sun shifts, the water flows, and time passes. As you gaze at the garden, you look for these subtle changes and transitions. The monk with the rake reaches the wall and then carefully steps to the side to avoid trampling his work. You notice that he's wearing special, soft shoes, which are less likely to leave footprints in the gravel. Yuto says that walking through the raked gravel of a Zen garden is a little like levitating or walking on water. Every movement is made with the utmost care. The patterns that the monk is creating in the sand represent water. In fact, every carefully arranged feature of the Zen garden has a kind of symbolism. But the exact nature of this symbolism is open to interpretation. For example, one famous Zen garden in Kyoto is so abstract that it has attracted countless readings over the years. Some see a tiger with her cubs. Others see mountaintops emerging through the clouds, while others see islands in a stream. According to one study, the reason for the garden's calming effect may be subliminal. When viewed from a certain vantage point, symmetrical lines create the shape of a tree. The trunk takes the form of an invisible line stretching out in front of the viewer. while the branches are the spaces between small groups of rocks. People find beauty in the image without their conscious minds even realizing what they're seeing. Perhaps the gardener who created this design 500 years ago did so unconsciously, moved by the mysterious impulses deep within him. As for the garden you are visiting now, Yuto has his own explanation. The small, moss-covered hill, which is topped by a graceful juniper tree, represents the legendary mountain of the immortals. The waterfall that flows down the side is a symbol of human vitality. This water then flows into the white sand, which represents the stream of life. As the circles of sand expand outwards into the gravel sea, all that is left is the expanse of time and existence. Seen in this way, the garden is a kind of allegory for the journey of life. But Yuto says that it's important to find your own meaning, rather than relying on another's interpretation. He suggests you spend some time here alone, forming your own relationship with the Zen garden's shapes, patterns, and symbols. When you're ready, you can come to find him in the temple gardens. But you should take your time. There's no rush. Yuto walks away, leaving you alone on the bench. You're not entirely alone, of course. You can see the monk in the garden, still raking the gravel. But from where you're sitting, you're too far to talk to or interact with him. You're happy just to watch, and you wouldn't want to interrupt him. He seems so focused on his work, completely absorbed by the repetitive, yet calming motions of the rake grazing the surface of the gravel. If you listen carefully, you can even hear the soft sound of the stones shifting, rising, and falling as they create new lines and ripples. You hadn't noticed this sound before, but the longer you spend in front of the garden, the more you become aware of. Other sounds and sensations gradually filter into your consciousness, like the gentle trickle of the waterfall and the melody of the birdsong from nearby trees. You notice how the colours of the garden change as the clouds pass overhead, hiding and then revealing the sun. Sometimes you focus on one detail at a time. You allow your gaze to drift slowly from left to right, watching the shrub, the hill, the waterfall, the rock, and finally, the monk. Then you look back in the opposite direction, right to left. The monk, the rock, the waterfall, the hill, and the shrub. The only movements are the flowing water and the monk gently dragging the rake through the gravel. And yet, somehow, it seems different every time. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but different. There are other moments when you try to draw your gaze outwards to see the garden as an assembled whole rather than individual parts. In some forms of Zen meditation, the aim of the practice is to be aware of the totality. Instead of focusing on a single object, the practitioner seeks conscious awareness of the whole without attachment, judgment, or interpretation. In this moment, you are looking, not meditating. But the simple act of looking is becoming more meaningful and more relaxing. As you remain aware of the garden as a whole, gazing at the scene as you would a painting, you feel a deep sense of calm. You breathe in deeply and watch as the monk continues his slow, careful passage through the garden. If you stay and watch until sunset, perhaps he will still be here, creating endless, beautiful patterns between the rocks and hills. After a while, the low walls of the garden seem to fade. You're no longer aware of any boundary between the neat, ordered garden and the wilder nature that surrounds it. You start to feel as though you might be part of the garden yourself, somehow inside it, rather than watching from a distance. Everything is touching, connected by merging lines and graceful patterns, whether natural or man-made. On reflection, this is what makes the garden so beautiful. The exact symbolism of individual aspects seems less important than the unified whole, and the sense of peace and happiness it gives you. Spending a long time in ordinary, untamed nature might have the same effect with a little patience. But the neat artistry of the Zen garden helps the visitor to achieve this realization more easily. As you gaze at the garden, your mind calms and clears, and you gradually sink into a deeper awareness of the world that surrounds you. If you stay here longer, you might continue to notice new details, but you also feel ready to move on and to see what else Yuto might show you. It doesn't take you long to find him. After just a few minutes of strolling through the temple gardens, you see Yuto sitting on a bench beneath the shade of the trees. He's sitting so still, with such a calm expression, that at first you think he might be meditating. But he greets you at once and asks about your experience in the Zen garden. You walk on together, discussing the garden and other aspects of the temple. Whenever you ask a question, he pauses for a moment before answering. He does this every time, even though he must have the answer on the tip of his tongue. It's so different from the rapid pace of conversations that you're used to. Perhaps he wants to give your question the respectful contemplation he feels it deserves. Or it may be that he does everything slowly, recognizing that there's rarely any need to rush. Now he's taking you to another part of the temple complex, to a small building surrounded by trees. It's a simple, one-story building with cream-coloured walls and translucent windows. This, Yuto explains, is the tea house. There is a long history of tea ceremonies in Zen Buddhism. It began in the 12th century when a Japanese monk travelled to China and returned to his homeland with matcha tea and a special technique for preparing it. Since then, it has been an important ritual for many people in Japan, a treasured part of the culture. Tea houses are not necessarily connected to Zen Buddhism, as many of them were built by samurai and merchants, not only monks. But you can see the Zen influence in the simplicity of the architecture, which is inspired by nature. And, as you will soon discover, the ceremony itself seems to represent the essence of Zen. You walk up the stone path to the tea house and take off your shoes at the door. As you enter, you are struck by the beautiful minimalism of the building. It's a single room with no furniture and only one decoration, a scroll painting of a mountain. Yuto invites you to sit on the floor while he prepares the tea. Before he begins the ritual, he explains that this is a moment he savours every single time. It's a ritual of gratitude, not just for the tea itself, but for the whole experience. He feels grateful for your company too. After washing your hands in a small stone basin, you kneel on the floor and watch him prepare the tea in silence. First, he brings out the tools: a little white bowl, a whisk and a tea scoop made of bamboo, a white linen cloth, and a container of hot water. Then he cleans the utensils thoroughly, with the same careful attention of the monk raking the garden. Once everything is clean, it's time to make the tea. He mixes the bright green matcha powder with hot water, stirring rapidly until it becomes a paste, and then a rich, full-bodied tea. It has a strong, distinctive smell that reminds you a little of the sea. You close your eyes to savor the scent, breathing in deeply. Yuto hands you the bowl of steaming tea. You cradle the bowl in your hands for a moment, waiting for it to cool, and then take a sip. It somehow tastes both bitter and sweet at once. You resist the instinct to judge and to decide whether you like it or not. Instead, you simply hold the taste on your tongue, noticing the complex balance of flavors. As you sip the tea slowly, you think of the Zen garden. You can still see it in your mind's eye, the perfect rectangle of gravel and sand, the miniature hill with its trickling waterfall, and the graceful movements of the monk. You are filled with a sense of contentment and gratitude. Soon you'll have to continue your journey, but you know that wherever you go, you'll take the memory with you. The Zen garden is not just a place, but a state of mind, and you can visit any time you like.